time I try to stream, it's like kind of a mess. There we go. Okay, it's streaming and it says it's streaming. So hopefully that's
So
what's
hopefully it
happening.
is.
Yeah, I sorry, every time I do live stream, I'm just like, wow, okay. All right, everyone. So everyone who is tuning in, I'll try to say this repeatedly throughout the book club. But yeah, we're having book club today. We're talking about The Red Deal. It's a really great book. Evan today is going to be leading the discussion on it. I made another YouTube channel so that way, like notifications and stuff don't get like kind of mixed up with videos. So for people who would like to join book club regularly, you can subscribe to the other channel, which is in the description, below, or linked in the description below. But yeah, we are having book club. I think it's a really important thing to do. I think it's an important thing to stream us talking together. I think it's I'm not really sure how to say this. I think the act of reading and then coming together and just talking about what we've learned has been extremely important for me, and I just want to try to share that experience with other people and invite people in to kind of have this like communal learning. Yeah, so without further ado, we're going to be talking about the Red Deal, and yeah, Evan, would you like to lead the way?
Absolutely. So there's this part that I really love on page 5 of the introduction. And I looked a little bit more into it. I have like post-it notes all over my book. Um, so this is what it says. This book takes as its primary inspiration the 2010 People's Agreement, drafted in Cochabamba, Bolivia, as part of the Proceso de Cambio, the process of change that MAS initiated. The agreement spells out principles of ecofeminism, eco-socialism, and anti-imperialism infused with traditional indigenous ecological knowledge. This is the spirit of this book, The Red Deal, a manifesto and movement born of indigenous resistance and decolonial struggle. The weather is changing, and so are the stakes. Everyone feels the temperature rising. And this is something that in the introduction that they go back to a lot. This metaphor of the winds changing, uh, the weather is getting stronger, and these movements are gaining ground across the world. Um, but the really interesting thing that I loved was their callback to the People's Agreement, which was a response to the Copenhagen Accord, which was basically a really limp-wristed sort of uh, non-binding agreement um, made through the UN Assembly, where they reaffirmed the Kyoto Accords and were like, "Yeah, we're committed to this," with really vague language. Um, but the
Wait,
People's
so can you
Agreement
explain
is
really
really
fast what are the
awesome.
Kyoto Accords?
Yeah, so the Kyoto Accords are another like climate agreement where they promise to have things better in like 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
So like similar to like the Green New
It
Deal and how it's like it's
yeah.
like a nice thought, but it's like not really gonna get us where we need to go.
Well, they actually talk about the Green Deal a couple of times in the book, so I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
we'll be able to talk more in depth about that specific proposal. But the Kyoto Accords, Paris Climate Accords, these sort of capitalistic version of how we can help improve our environment by subsidizing, uh, like you know, companies that are supposed to do better, that sort of thing. Forgive my cynicism, but that's just how I'll go for that. If we do want to talk about like the specific things that they've proposed, how those things are going, and how those have impacted the world so far, I can do some more research into that, and I'm sure we can talk about a couple of things because most of the book today is actually talking about um, oh you'll have to forgive my white person pronunciations, um, but the Wet'suwet'en Nation in Canada and their their very strong case for Indigenous control over their ancestral lands, um, and the Canadian mounted police just not allowing them to do that and letting companies roll over into the area. Um, but yeah, that's the that paragraph and the People's Agreement um, are the central tenet of what the book is about. Um, so, I mean, we've got a pretty diverse group here, but does anybody have like any like background in any of the specific topics that were mentioned in that paragraph? We've got things like where did it go? Ecofeminism, eco-socialism, anti-imperialism, indigenous resistance, decolonization, like all of that stuff. So, was there anything that you guys found interesting in this first part of the introduction? Is basically what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm just gonna just maybe just kind of go off a little bit. Like this was, yeah, I love how this kind of like summarizes, like when it says this is the spirit of this book, the Red Deal, a manifesto, a movement born of indigenous resistance and decolonial struggle. I love how it focuses decolonialism. I love how it just as you're saying, Evan, it encaptures ecofeminism, eco-socialism, and anti-imperialism, infused with traditional indigenous ecological knowledge. So it's like it's really is like all these really important things wrapped up into one movement. They're not mutually exclusive, and I just love how it's just stated so clearly that these things are so heavily intertwined, and that is what the Red Deal is. It's so exciting to me. So yeah, that's what stood out to me immediately, and yeah, again, just like the focus on decolonialism, I think is just something that like I think a lot of people on the left talk about, anti-imperialism, ending capitalism, revolutionary acts, and it's like, okay, like that's really great, but especially in the Western, the Americas, really, and so much of the world, I don't think people really have this understanding that we live in a world where we are dealing with either people are either literally still living in colonialism, or most countries are dealing post-colonialism in that legacy, and that's actually just the state of our world. And so I think if people could just actually understand the world in terms of colonialism and decolonizing the world and also the country that you're in, it's just a different shift. It's a very different shift. I think people need to understand leftism and ending capitalism in that context. So that's what I have to say about that. I don't want to take up too much space. Emery, I know that
No,
you
you're
probably have a lot
good.
to say. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah. Does anyone have anyone else want to add to that or say anything about the intro?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an indigenous person, so it, it it wasn't anything, I guess, new. There was a lot of really interesting threads that were connected through like Venezuela and Bolivia, and like I'm a elder millennial-ish, so I do remember the Kyoto Accords, and I do remember all of those the propaganda campaigns, on the news and stuff like that. Up here in Canada, about oh, those global South countries are going socialist. So, um, which is interesting. Like I have been, I'm up north, so I don't like I said, I get all that propaganda, so it's hard to make those connections. So I was really, and obviously I've been loosely kind of fitting them together in my own mind, but it was really nice to see the threads through of of that connection of like our cousins down south. So that was really cool. Um, and like you said, Lua, uh, decolonization is kind of the root of like the rot of imperialism, because like that's the main you know mechanism that they use for their power across the world. So I understand it's very. hard to grasp that the country that has told you it's really great and it's been free forever is like actually ongoing, trying to genocide like me personally. Like I'm just gonna straight up say it. Like uh, through my life, the state literally has shaped it almost entirely. There's so many facets that I had no control over, you know, and it caused a lot of harm. So, yeah, I guess that's the one thing is that, yeah, decolonization is kind of like a super big key. And obviously, if you read a bit more into this or been hanging around with a lot of indigenous land defenders, water protectors, whether that is, that's kind of like our thing is like we unfortunately need to be freed before there is any kind of like notion of freedom in the Americas. So yeah, so that was pretty cool. Anyways, Miigwech, thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you. I actually really loved. They spend a lot of time in this introduction talking about the Unitstoten camp uh, in Canada and their struggle with this pipeline that's being built on their land. And I think it's probably one of the strongest examples. All of the stuff we're talking about at the same time, which is 100% why they used it. And there's a, let's see, there was a part that I thought was amazing. Let's see, there's the Red Nation. They talk about the Green Deal. Their slogan of reconciliation is dead. But there's this bit that I really loved in the decolonization section. It's a little bit smaller than the others, but I think that the statement is really strong. Ending settler colonialism and capitalism and returning indigenous lands are all possible and necessary. Um, I again, I love how strong they are with these statements. It's great. They're not trying to like sugarcoat this, and they show the examples that make their case, I think, incredibly strong. Um, as much as this is like a book that's designed for like I don't know outreach, I think it's also an awesome collection of just experience from across the world, um, which I like. I like stuff that brings people from movements all over the world together. I sometimes I think that those kinds of things are rare. um, I study a lot of history because I'm a nerd, and it's hard to find this kind of stuff. Um, you know, "Workers of the world unite" was a slogan that went away a long time ago. But yeah, so I wanted to also make a note of the various events that they do talk about, because they do talk about a lot of events, not just the Unitstoten camp. And correct me if I'm saying that wrong, anybody. Um, um, but
Probably,
they do
but
talk about.
I'm not from the West Coast, so it's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know either.
But they do talk about the Australian bushfires. They talk about fracking rigs. There is they do mention this, and this is actually like a thing that we could go into a lot. So there was a policy during the Bush and Obama years for energy independence, and they mention the May 2019 U.S. Department of Energy announcing that they were renaming fossil fuels as
God.
molecules of U.S. freedom.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
so
like,
that is
what?
yeah, that's from a policy shift that the Trump administration was pushing. I haven't been able to find anything that says that it's gone away. You know, But their policy shift was, instead of energy independence, it's energy dominance. The idea is to become a net energy exporter, and dominate markets. They phrase it as creating free markets around the world, competitive markets around the world, that sort of thing, which is essentially just, trying to force market competition in Venezuela and other countries that are, specifically oriented towards mass exporting oil, and dropping that price so that, they can't have those social reforms that they want because all of that capital goes away, right? So that's kind of what that is, and we can talk about energy dominance if we want. Um, there's of course the Copenhagen Accord. We can talk about the Kyoto Accords. Um, there's this interesting thing with the Unisoten camp, um, where I was like, how did these companies get permission to go out there in the first place? So they talked to tribal councils instead of traditional hereditary tribal leaders, um, and got permission from these councils that are set up by the government. Um, I believe that the council members are still elected by the actual indigenous tribes. Um, However, it is a system that you have these councils. Um,
So
and
you
those
broke
were
up a little
that's
bit in your last
how those.
couple sentences there.
Am I lagging?
It's just for the last couple sentences. It's a system, something about it being required.
Yeah. So the system of tribal councils, that the what's it? It's Trans Canada. It's TC pipelines or something like that now. Um, they got permission to build the pipeline on that native land, from these tribal councils, which is problematic because the councils are required to exist by the federal government of Canada. It is not how these specific tribes have been organized, and their organization has never ceased to be. Um, they are just required to do that because Canada says so.
This is a colonial
There was no.
implementation to control them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's no treaty that was ever signed with them to allow this. They just said, no, you're doing this because we say so.
And then it just,
Um,
gives them
mhm.
access to like make this pipeline when the community's saying, actually, no, I
Right.
never fucking said that. Fuck you.
Yeah, and this is something that happens a lot in the U.S. I don't think. I'm trying to think of. I can't think of anybody who has the same uh, historical position as this indigenous group does, where they have never lost their actual structure. Um, in the U.S., pretty much any native group has been uh, stamped out, subjugated, or sent away to their own reservations of land. Um, I can't think of anybody who's managed to maintain their original tribal structure. Um, but in my experience here in Salt Lake, um, tribal councils making compromises is something that happens a lot. Um, the
I think it's
university.
sorry, can I just interject
Oh
and
yeah,
maybe give you a
no,
little
go
bit
for
more
it. I can only
a little
speak
more
from my
yeah,
experience in
yeah.
Utah, so you're
Yeah.
from Canada. Like this is much more pertinent.
Yeah, don't worry, I got you, brother. So I think the biggest thing to understand about the situation of the tribal councils and the hereditary chiefs in Unisoan, um, is that it's on the East Coast. So the way that the crown and the government, whatever you want to call it, here in the in Canada, signed treaties was they signed kind of where I am. Like I am a part of Treaty One, so we were the first signatories to treaties, and there is a whole lot of sus stuff that went on during that time with uh, translators that kind of like told both parties what they wanted to hear and like and stuff like that. But either way, the point being that it kind of moved westward, and this was over time, over years, and over years, more and more west you went, the more and more people, like, because we had our own structures of trade and bargain. So
Right.
the one thing that lots of colonial propaganda is that we didn't have any structures, or that we didn't know what we were signing on to. So like the one thing is because like the person that was translating was telling us we were signing on to something, but actually it was something different. Um, and and like so like as we went, we got like the different nations and the different treaties actually got harder to sign for um, the crown with the people. And once you get to the west coast, they didn't cede their land, they didn't sign treaties at those times. um, so then it was like there has been constantly since then that clash between hereditary chiefs and the government, uh, and their lands that they have sovereignty over still, um, because Canada developed around them and like literally burnt down their houses and like all of that stuff. All the gross things that you heard about are real. Um, and so when it comes to the tribal councils and those being introduced, I don't know the exact legislation or when it happened, but essentially imposed on the, I think it was through the Indian Act actually. So like the Indian Act basically means that like it's the one piece of legislation that kind of like governs all of us in Canada.
Mm.
And so as you can, there's kind of a little bit of a dissonance there. Well, they didn't cede it, but they're under this Indian Act. So that's kind of like the original thing that these, and then I guess like the main point about these, they call them consultations. So like the crown and the companies consult with these Indian, band councils is what they're called, tribal councils if you're into that. But yeah, they only have certain abilities. They can't say outright no. Like they literally don't have the legal power to say no. Like they can say verbally no, or like we don't agree with this, come with a better one. But legally, the company and the crown don't have to go back to the table. They just have to put in their report, oh well, they didn't want to, and then they make their decision, well this is best for like the rest of Canada, so whatever, let's just do it, it's gonna happen. That's how it's been happened in the past, or other times it would be like through duress, or you know unfortunately maybe a little bit of corruption as well. That's also a factor with any kind of colonial power. So that's that's the main one, is that like I think might be new information, is that like there's limited power that these tribal councils or band councils even have to say no, to the point where they literally can't say no. So like it's just forced on upon you. So that's kind of clearing up that little bit where it's like,
Oh yeah, that's
yeah,
really
yeah,
important to know.
yeah. So anyways, thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah,
Oh
so
yeah,
like basically the
thank you.
state.
That's awesome. Thank you for contributing that.
Of course.
So just to clarify, so basically the state comes in and checks in with Indigenous people, and they're like, "Oh, like, is this okay if we do that?" And then Indigenous people be like, "No, that's not okay." And they'll be like, "Oh, well, we checked in. That's literally all that we're gonna hold ourselves accountable to, is just checking in, and whatever we ultimately decide goes. It doesn't actually matter what Indigenous people say when the government does check in with what they want." Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like there might be a little bit more red tape about it, but like that's pretty
In a
much
nutshell.
how it goes down. So they literally just through any kind of violence, like legal whatever, like propaganda, because a lot of the times at simultaneously when these things are being decided, they'll have the national news talking about it, and how like, oh well, these Indigenous people don't want this to go through, why don't they want to prosper through having stuff. But generally when it comes to these agreements, like like you can see the material conditions, like the like the reserves that these things are going through, or the Indigenous land that these are going through, they get like 0.000% of the profits. They might get a few jobs, you know what I mean, that are often temporary because it's like a pipeline. So like once it's built, you don't have very many other jobs. So like it's this facade to the Canadians, to the all Canadians that you know, well they're the ones that are like their own destruction. So that same sort of like lie that just keeps popping up whenever um, this happens, and it's juxtaposed against like their prosperity and their development. You know, well, like, oh, well, you're stopping us from getting all that money, so like they're ever going to share it with us afterwards. They literally don't have to. So
Yeah,
to
they
their own
never
loss.
have.
But
Yeah, I don't know why
yeah,
that's not going to change. They're just going to keep on exploiting you
yeah,
in your land.
that's pretty much it. And like I don't know if anyone's from Canada in here, so I'm not sure if I'm, you know, opening anyone's eyes, but that's they keep the Canadian public like very very confused about it, and
Like, what's
they
going
have
on?
very
Why are these
successfully
Indians so upset about a pipeline?
exactly.
It's like, oh, well, here's some indigenous people to fucking tell you, and they're like, yeah, like, yeah.
Oh, they're, you know, and like all, like, I don't even want to say them, but like insert every single excuse of like our own individual like problems, and then unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
it's like even like, you know, the people that have fallen through the cracks. That's who we get judged as, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
the media is very
it sucks.
manipulative.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they know what they're
yeah.
doing.
Anyways,
No, thank you. That's like really important. So I was going through this and being like, oh, okay, so this is a little similar to how it works in Utah. Because in Utah we have a Ute reservation that has slowly shrinked over the years. Their population has continued to drop. I think they started out with something like 23,000 people, and it's at like 1,000 now. And it's like this continual desperate attempt to survive. Um, and one of the ways that they've recently been able to do that is through their business council, is by licensing their name to the University of Utah, the Utah Utes. It's one of the only universities left in the U.S. that actually gutes to use a actual native tribe's name as their mascot, um, because they got permission from a business council from a reservation. And that's what I was connecting it to, these local politics that are happening around me. But that is incredibly important to know that it is not the same. That's like, that changes like the whole thing that I was talking about. Like, that's so much more important to know.
yeah, yeah. I'm sure they probably go into it later on in it, but yeah, it's interesting, like the through line there between like situation up here and there is like encompassing municipalities that like they want to impose their own will regardless, you know,
Yeah.
and like that notion of like surviving. It's an interesting thing that they use the Utes and they like license it out because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean like that's unfortunately where we're at, comrades. Like there's a lot of capitalist like intervention currently happening that are trying to eh, like, you know, help slash, you know, extract from us and everywhere, you know. So like, you know, hopefully that you know, you guys can see those things where you guys are, if you're near any indigenous reserves, or next time you guys encounter that consultation bit. Like that's one thing that they no media outlet would ever tell you, that like the consultation is literally like, hey, we're doing this. Oh, we don't
Mm-hmm.
want that. Do it this way.
That's
Oh, we
literally
don't
how.
care. You know, like even in the, so one specific thing about that pipeline is that the councils, a lot of like some people signed on, okay, down the pipeline, but a lot of people didn't, and they actually proposed another route for that to happen, like with their own money, came with this proposal so that it wouldn't, you know, affect aquifers and other stuff and go through their land and all this other jazz. But the company was like, nope, we're doing it this way because it's cheaper for us, you know. simple as that. Like, it's cheaper for us, so it's happening that way, and that's why. So like this, what's happening right now is it's not just like, oh, land, it's ours. It's like, no, that we tried our best, and every single time we tried our absolute best. Even at the time, I don't know if you guys know this, but we weren't allowed to have legal advice. Like, we weren't allowed to have lawyers represent ourselves in these courts for like 50 years. So like all this development in the past, like in the early half of the century in Canada, happened because we weren't even allowed to go to the tables. Like, we were
Right.
proud to be there,
Wait, so
and then they
like
would just
you weren't
tell us
allowed
what's
to have
happening.
lawyers.
That's it. Yeah.
Can you just
Like
tell me like a little bit more about it? Like, so like literally like you're fighting these legal battles, but like you're not allowed to have lawyers.
we are now,
or you
but
weren't
I
allowed
think
to
it
like the
was
last
in
50 years, or yeah, like
it ended in like 1957 or something like that. It happened between like 1912 or something like that and like 1957. So like those are some of the major projects that happened in Canada to develop it.
Right.
Were just forced, and like that's where, I don't know. I could go on and on, so I don't want to keep derailing it. But like, yeah, it's
this is all
yeah,
just really
it's
important. I think it's really irrelevant to what we're
yeah.
talking about. Yeah, this is not
Mm.
derailing at all. So yeah, that's just really fucked up. So basically, the government was like you can't have lawyers because we just want to be able to like you know legally what is legal. That says a lot about the state. But, like, we want to legally just take your land, and so like we don't want you to be able to
Yep.
defend yourself. So we're just gonna legally make it so you can't have lawyers to defend yourselves even. And that was just
Yep.
going on
Yep.
for like a really long time up until about 50 years ago, basically.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. And in like my specific area, like they put the train like right through it, and it was during that time, so there's not really much we can do. We recently did um, get like compensation for that, but like there's a whole sticky situation. Basically, like there was like 100-year lease or whatever, so like there was the railway that went through, as well as there was a bunch of like farmers in the area that like sort of used our land as farmland, which was like given to them by the crown, blah blah blah. But it was like 100-year lease. That 100 years came up, and they were like, "Well, we developed on it. It's ours now." Like that same excuse, like keeps coming up. So whenever they say like we
They
developed,
develop
it's
it.
like the most like biggest lie ever. I get that, like, oh, we
Like
put stuff on it, but it's like
if
that
it's
still
not
doesn't.
developed in a certain way, then they're like it's not owned, and so like we developed it, therefore it's ours, even though it's literally
Yeah,
just doesn't need to be developed. It's doing fine. Leave it the fuck alone. And yeah,
yeah, yeah. So, but either way, yeah, we did get some compensation for that. But like, get this, guys. So it the courts ruled that uh, this land was like taken. You know what I mean? So there was needs to be compensation done, and that was it in like 1967. Guess when that was finally done? In December. In December. So for because the crown and we have no legal authority to push them to do anything about it, they just leave it in court. They leave a decision. They don't make any. No one's pushing them. No one actually has to do anything about it. So they let it linger for 50 years until they picked it back up in the like late 90s or whatever. And then it was decided that like, oh, what was the number? It was in they decided on 31 million or something like that in 19 like 67. So like, how much is that in inflation? A lot. You know what I mean? Like,
A lot.
and even that estimate is just like super lowballed for at the time of 31 million. So, I get right now there might be some movement from the government on like land back and stuff like that. So they might all the propaganda might say like, oh, well, they got this back, but like there is a long history behind every single one of them, and even those decisions that are made today are like absolute tragedies about like the whole situation. It's like barely something to celebrate. It's like, oh, finally, but
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like thanks for the crumbs.
yeah, yeah, no, but exactly, and then you're supposed to just like, yeah, kiss their feet and not knock over their statues.
Thanks for making cookies.
Yeah. Anyways, sorry. Rant over.
No, thank you. I I think one of the biggest things about going through this book um, is going to be making connections to things that are happening locally around us, um, because I mean it's the book is trying to make connections into a larger global movement. So I think one of the best things we can do as like conscientious readers as we like look through this thing um, is to make connections to what's going on around us locally. I mean, like that's kind of what I'm trying to do. So maybe I'm pushing that on you guys. um, but I think that that's important to what the point of the book is. Um, so as we kind of look through, and if you think like, oh, there's this thing that's happening where I live that's absolutely what we're talking about, like we should talk about it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Um,
Oh, sorry.
go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna like just talk about this video that I saw today. It was a Pam Palmeter video, and I think the person who came on is, oh, I forgot her name, but she like helped with potatoes. Um, sorry, I'm being very vague, but this person, sorry, let me just actually find this tweet. Her name is, yeah, wait, oh, I'm gonna butcher her name. Tanya. Wow, I think it's just Tanya Cameron. But she was on this podcast with Pam Palmeter, and was just talking about how she was basically just set up these mutual aid networks. Like during the beginning of the pandemic, she like talked about like people, like there wasn't any food in the grocery stores, and so she just basically was able to connect with other people on, I think, maybe Facebook, and connect all these people to like these potatoes. And she ended up helping like farmers get their potatoes out, and she ended up helping feeding a bunch of families. And now she has this mutual aid network where people are donating, and she's getting supplies to people, and it's just like really incredible. But she just has this like ability to listen to what her community needs, and then to establish mutual aid. And so it's like that kind of awareness. um I definitely just feel inspired while reading this book about just being able, I just feel like very like tuned in, like what are people in the community saying they need, um in my immediate local community, and then also in the global community. Yeah, I don't know if that was too tangential, but yeah.
This is good. Welcome to book club.
Woo.
It's just us going on a whole bunch of tangents as we slowly learn more and more.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we got like a good 10 minutes left, and I wanted to talk about the last bit where they start going into, it's the last section, the red deal, um, but they have some really awesome like sections here um, that I wanted to read, and then maybe we can talk about them for a little bit. Or if somebody's like, I have this thing that I really wanted to talk about, we can talk about that too. Okay, so it says on page 20, um, we find that much of what gets framed through an environmental lens, including the efforts to stop pipelines in Wet'suwet'en and Standing Rock, often misses the point about capitalism, and sometimes about indigenous sovereignty too. Conservation and related notions of protection, preservation, and defense, all popular terms in the indigenous land-based movements, like efforts to protect the sacred, continue to dominate the framing of indigenous liberation struggles as efforts for environmental justice. The notion of protecting land and water requires an understanding of what we are protecting it from. And a little bit further down, I had this thing that like I just put like hell yeah in there because I was like, yeah. Rather than taking an explicitly conservationist approach, the Red Deal instead proposes a comprehensive, full-scale assault on capitalism using indigenous knowledge and tried-and-true methods of mass mobilization as its ammunition. This bit is identifying what we're protecting these things from, and it's capitalism
Mm-hmm.
as it continues to live
It's
by the support
always
of things like
capitalism.
white supremacy. Like it always is, though, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think this sort of stuff uh, is the kind of like, I don't know, the core of what I've read so far, uh, which is, I don't know, important to me. I really liked it. Um, and it made me think of, so there's this, Utah has a lot of this because we're like this weird state that's so specifically a colony, it's insane. Um, but we had a monument that was, well, not a monument. It's a national like park, sort of. I think it might be. Yeah, I should have done more research into it, but I was just thinking about it as I read that bit. Um, it's called Bears Ears, and the Trump administration shrunk it by a lot, and it includes a lot of sacred lands. Um, and when it got shrunk, there was a large kind of, I guess, social movement in Salt Lake to get it to expand back to its original borders. Um, and there's a lot of strain controversy over that. But the main reason all of that happened, the main reason that these native lands would no longer be protected by the federal government, where they weren't, the actual native lands. Um, what I'm saying is that they weren't held by native people; they were held by the federal government. Um, so it's a strange situation to be in the first place. But the reason that they were shorted, they were changed to be smaller, is so that they could be exploited for resources. Utah is most of our export economy is minerals. We have the largest open pit mine in the world. um, at least it was in 2006. That might have changed. It's still pretty big. Um, it's kind of, I don't know if you guys have ever swung by here, but if you're ever at the Salt Lake Airport, you can see it. If you look out to the mountains, the west, those mountains are gone because they are open pit mines now. So yeah, it's this sort of stuff, as companies continue to gain profit from the land that we've settled, um, that we lose the land. Those mountains don't really exist anymore. It's a massive open pit mine, and this stuff will continue to happen all over the world unless we, start listening to the actual native people and what they're saying. And I'm glad that like we have this book club to talk about this stuff, because I I hadn't even heard of the book until it got mentioned here, and now it's like one of the most important books I own. Like, I'm really glad I have this, and I want to talk about it with everybody that I meet. It's like, I think that's one of the important things we can do, is talk about it on our communities and like where we are, and as we continue to read it and learn about everything that it is going to tell us, um, we can continue to help grow this consciousness. So yeah, what did you guys think after reading that first half of of the introduction? I know it's I cut it to half the introduction because it's still pretty short of a book, and it's gonna take us only like 7-ish, like uh, book clubs to get through the whole thing. So I wanted to like take it at a little bit of a slower pace to make sure that we can really get some good meat off of this thing. So yeah, what did you guys think? Takeaways.
I enjoyed the book greatly from what I've got from what there was recorded so far. There's a lot of connections made in there that are hard for me to have connections from, just from the life experience I have. So it's always good to have more things to add into connections. I also appreciate it being kind of upfront that you need to get rid of capitalism. You have to respect indigenous people's land rights and whatnot. Basically, we want to survive on top of it just being the right thing to do. And capitalism is an extremely destructive force that disregards and devalues life. That's my main thoughts.
Yeah, anything from you, Tom, or post Vinem? I haven't heard from you. Oh, we also have another person here named Jan.
Yeah, hello, Jan.
Anything from some of you all that we haven't heard from as much?
Well, I really liked it. Pretty much echoing the thoughts already expressed. Yeah, I'm in a similar situation that, I mean, I'm half British, half Italian, living in the Netherlands. So there's a lot of colonialist baggage all over the place, but and just fundamentally just a lot of stuff that I've never learned, I've never been told, allowed to learn in many ways as well. So it's just really great. You know, I keep thinking better late than never. I'm learning this stuff now. But there was something you said earlier when you were saying that those mountains are gone. That I just sort of, because something I did cheat a bit. I did skip ahead a bit in the book. I did read more than I was supposed to. Sorry.
You're okay.
But there was a later on when it talks about, like, it goes into like the specific manifesto points, and it was talking about the relationship with the environment and with nature, and it was talking about, I don't remember the exact page, I'm sorry, but it talks about how the environment, nature, animals, everything are all relatives. Like it stresses this kind of interconnectedness of all life on the planet. And I'm sure, like, for a lot of people, because of how indigenous cultures have been represented in media, it's a solely spiritual thing. Whereas here, it really felt like they were just saying, look, it's blatantly obvious that all of these things are interconnected. Like,
we're part of a biotic community. As a kind of being, we are another kind of animal. We're a part of this earth. We're actually all interconnected. And, you know, we as beings with this kind of consciousness have the responsibility to have the self-awareness of being in a biotic community and not fucking it up for everyone else.
Yeah. And it's like this big myth that capitalism, one of the many myths, is this fundamental, like, us and them, that they apply to within humanity, within life on Earth. And this kind of conception is like, oh, well, we can use these resources out of sight, out of mind, you know, this kind of thing. Well, we can dump our shit in the ocean, we can level this rainforest, whatever, we don't see it. But the thing where you're saying, and I don't know if that was intentional, but the fact that you said we've lost those mountains. It's the focus is on all, because it's like, this is the one planet we have, and these fucking ghouls will be like, oh, you know, this is their stuff that we're taking and we're using, and then it's gone. It's like, no, that was everybody's, and now and then it's all going to be gone. And yeah, that stuck with me a lot. Yeah. Sorry, I kind of do the Schopenhauer. I think it was Schopenhauer who said life is a pendulum between sadness and boredom, That's like, or ennui, and it's like, God, I learn these things, and it's like, wow, this is great, I'm learning, and then I feel sad.
But then you should feel angry because now we can do something about it.
I know, I should be. I am getting there. I am getting angry. I'm mostly angry at the Dutch government at the moment, but there's lots of things to be angry. Lots of things
at
to
the
be
moment.
angry about.
Yeah.
Today's
At the moment.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. I just wanted to interject and kind of as an Indigenous person, just to let you know that it's really great to hear that there's so many people that are coming and are open to learning this stuff, because like you said, there's it's not necessarily 100% everyone's fault that they don't know this stuff. There's literally been a propaganda machine like implanting these ideas of who we are and what our relationship is and with each other and in the land, into just material conditions of the individual. But it's just really really nice and really great to hear that people are learning more. So I just wanted to say thank you, Tom, and like it was just momentarily a really breath of fresh air to hear someone put those things together without me having to just like drag them through history. So thank you.
That's what I'm saying. Book club, like it's something else. Like being able to just talk, like read a book and then like talk about it with people about like things that are really important. And like, I mean, like me and Wasingan, or we're talking about this the other day about just like the frustration of talking about racism, colonialism, and we talk about these things with white people, how it's like people are like, oh, like what about, are you gonna try to pull white genocide? Are you gonna try to do da 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 da? And you're like, no, I'm just trying to talk about racism and ending colonialism, things like that. And the act of like going through a book club with people and talking about a book, excuse me, is just to not have that like really assaulting experience of like people just demonizing you when you're trying to talk about racism, and to be able to come together and be like, well, what can we do together about these things? What can we do together about colonialism? And for me, like being able to have these conversations with white people, like it gives me hope, because I think for so long I'm like, this just isn't gonna happen. Like we're not gonna be able to talk about this, and then book club happens, and we're all talking about this right now, and a lot of you here are white, and we're able to do this, and it just gives me hope. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. There's something that's really healing about the communal coming together and learning together. So I just really appreciate it. I don't want to take up too much time. I know we're going to be wrapping up soon, but one thing I want to point out really fast is the book doesn't, explicitly talk about Greta Thumenberg.
It doesn't mention her by name.
It doesn't mention her by name, which I really appreciate, because she's, she got into this activism as a child, and she is doing like good work, and also there are like Indigenous activists like talking about this, and they always get swept to the side in favor of a white person talking about this. So it's like, I appreciate the work that she's doing, but there is an issue of like, why are we not focusing on Indigenous people who have been talking about this for so long? Like, why does it have to be a white person talking to white people? Osigan, you were like saying this like the other day, that like people are like, well, where are all the Indigenous people on the front lines? And you're like, what the actual fuck? Like,
they've been on the front lines for way too long.
Been on the front lines for the whole fucking time. Like, you just don't listen. You just don't listen to Indigenous people
all over the place.
And yeah, so I think that just bringing up that issue is really important. Like, just the need to listen to Indigenous people is so important. It's important to ending capitalism. It's fundamentally intertwined with decolonialism. So these voices need to be centered. Particularly need to be centered, and so I appreciate that book pointed it out. And then one more thing, the last section that we read was just, oh, you know what? we didn't actually get in. Wait, no, we did get into that. Okay, so a caretaking economy. It just really highlights.
Oh yeah, I'm excited for that bit.
Yeah, it just really highlights like how just the focus on the people who care of take care of others, take care of society, take care of the land. That kind of shift in understanding of it's like it's really is the opposite of exploitation. So just like keeping in mind the people who are caretakers, and those are the people that we should be focusing on, highlighting, supporting. I thought that was just a really great section. But yeah.
Yeah, that'll be what we're starting with next time.
Okay, awesome.
Yay.
Yeah. Although next week we're going to be talking all about love.
Yeah, we're into bell hooks.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's still watching, we are just going to be switching off every other week. We're going to do bell hooks next week and then get back to the red deal and just switch off every week. But yeah, does anyone have any... Oh, sorry, there's some just stuff in the chat that I just want to read. Yeah, I'm sorry about the mic issue, everyone. I need to figure out OBS. I have this issue every time. I'm so sorry. Red Nation sent me a copy of the Red Deal, and I have been sharing it around as it's accessible, especially to non-leftists. Good stuff. Glad to see it in the book club. Yeah, it's really great. It's really accessible. A lot of stuff that's like I'm glad that it's not too like it's just so straightforward. It's not something that you have to kind of sit. It's not tedious to read. So Probo Cisman says it's spiritual, but also materially based at the same time, in my opinion. Yeah, it's both. It's spiritual and it's also rooted in materialism. Can anyone turn up the audio? I can't hear even with a max out audio. Dang it. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'll fix the audio issue next time, which I say every book club, but I'm gonna really figure it out this time. Yeah.
We could hop on like 10 minutes early just to see if we could calibrate it right.
Yeah, I'll figure that out. But yeah. Does anyone have anything else? I know we didn't hear from Postfinem and Jan.
That's all from me. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thanks everyone for coming, and I am gonna end the stream there.